Okay, can everyone see my screen here? All right, thanks,
All good,
Jasmine.
Miguel.
Wonderful. All right, well, we're at 2:03, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. One last reminder, as you're joining, please feel free to update your Zoom name to reflect your organization so we know where to put you in the breakout rooms later. Well, good afternoon. My name is Miguel Moravik. You see me here supporting Jasmine in these wonderful Clean Energy Academy workshops. Today I'll be facilitating and mute. Please don't forget to mute as you hop in. We are recording. This is workshop number 3, and today's topic is green finance and other exciting opportunities from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We're going to talk to you about lenders that are out there offering low-cost green loans. This is all so that you all have more options. Do not feel obligated to do business with any of these banks or lenders or folks that we introduce you today. But again, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a really new, novel, exciting opportunity to access low-cost capital that we hope will help you all make that best case to your finance offices about why you should move forward on clean energy projects. So we have a few things in store for today on the agenda. We're going to do a check-in activity, hear from some really awesome presenters about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And then after a break, we'll have that interactive breakout room that you all have come to love so much, along with some announcements and reminders. By the end of today, you should feel pretty confident about the offerings from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, what exact products are available, and maybe even which GGRF lenders are in your area that you might like to have a follow-up conversation with. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jasmine to start our check-in activity.
Awesome. Thanks, Miguel. Wanted to start with the check-in activity to get the juices flowing, and also for all of us to get a sense of how we are approaching the topic of today's workshop. So you all might remember from our first workshop that we utilized the annotate feature in Zoom. So if you check on your Zoom where you can also, it's the same bar where you can turn on and off your video, there should be in new Zoom a pencil icon that shows where you can annotate. If you have an older version of Zoom, that might be in a drop-down menu. So here's one screenshot on the bottom left that shows you where you can find the annotate. And also there's also a screenshot for old Zoom and where you can find your view options, drop-down menu, and choose annotate. Next slide, Miguel. And so after that, after you click on annotate, a sidebar will show up and you'll click on the check mark and you'll then see an option of 6 different stamps. Choose whatever you identify best with, and then you can use that for the next few slides. And I already see that folks are playing around with it. So feel free to choose the heart, the star, anything that connects with you. So the first, if you go to the next slide, Miguel.
I'm making stamps.
Oh, great.
Oh, yep, there you go. I'm going to go pointer and then next slide. There you
Cool. I see you, Glenn. So to practice this, we are going to start off with this first icebreaker question. Rate on the scale how much you agree with this statement. Breakfast is better than dinner. Are you all the way on the left where you're like, no way, dinner is better? Or are you a huge fan of breakfast? So indicate on the spectrum where you sit. Great. And I feel like you might be on a different function of Zoom. So if you click that check mark, that's where you'll be able to find your stamps. And if you have more issue, our team can reach out to you. But I see where you stand. Okay. Oh, and go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't realize my thing came off. Yeah, I was having some technical difficulties. Everybody
No
knows
worries.
where I stand. Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're a fan of dinner. Love it. Okay, there's not really a general consensus. We're like all over the board. Okay, this was just a practice question to get you acquainted with stamping. Next, so Miguel, let's clear it and then next slide. All righty. So, on a scale of I don't know it all, and you see Dan Levy over here on the left, or on the right, with being super knowledgeable, answer the question, how much do you know about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund? So rate how familiar you might be with GGRF on this scale here.
All right, I'm seeing more variation than for the breakfast question. That's exciting.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And we're going to get a quick screenshot of this before we move on, just so we can capture the data we've collected here. But really good to know this is where we all, this is how we are approaching today's topic. Okay, Miguel, let's wipe and we'll go on to our next check-in question. Okay, so rate on this scale your organization's interest in leveraging green finance for projects. If you're all the way on the left, you're feeling a bit nervous, or you might need to learn more, or you might be Novak Djokovic on the right end of the spectrum where you're ready, you're saying, bring it on. I'm excited to talk to a lender. You might be at that stage. So right here where you might fall. Great. Okay. I'm seeing the stamps slow down a little bit. So good to know where folks are. It seems like there's a good contingency in the middle. And hopefully today's workshop will help to both inform you of your options, your organization's options, and where you could go from here. So Miguel, I'll pass it back off to you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks everyone for that check-in question. We hope that was a fun way to start. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first pair of speakers. We're really lucky to have Nick Bobst and Asia Salazar from the RMI team. Nicholas is a senior associate on the Center for Climate Aligned Finance team, where he focuses on partner engagement with the center's financial institutions and foundational partners. He also supports RMI's climate equity initiatives related to GGRF. Prior to RMI, Nicholas worked for a commercial design build firm executing due diligence, design, and construction of multifamily housing developments across the country. Nicholas has his master's degree in sustainability management. Asia is an associate on the Center for Climate Aligned Finance team. She works across various work streams within Center, most recently aiding the GGRF team to help influence the energy transition across the financial sector and ensure the successful implementation of IRA programs. Prior to this position, Asia was a Ray Clean Energy Fellow and a researcher at the Purdue University. Nick, Asia, so glad to have you. And please, by all means, feel free to start. I will come off of, I will mute myself and just advance the slides for you.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel, and really appreciate the opportunity to present to this group. It's exciting to see that there's kind of a wide range of comfort level and expertise with clean energy financing and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And so hopefully today can be an opportunity just to learn a little bit more and get a little more granular on the details of the program and see how this might support you and your organization with new and innovative opportunities. So really excited to jump in. I think the way that we want to spend this time is really giving a high-level overview of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, what it is, who are the actors, what are the priority projects, how is funding going to flow through the various different programs. And so, and then we'll take a look kind of how RMI has been supporting through various different efforts and explore how this might be applicable to all of you. And so there will be time for discussion and Q&A at the end. So please do jot down any questions you have. Try to save them till the end. But if you have anything pressing, throw it in the chat. I might not be able to see it, but Miguel or someone else on the team can maybe flag it and raise it to the group if it's really important. So I think we can move on to the next slide.
You got it.
So what is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund? it's a $27 billion investment made by the EPA to mobilize new actors to fill critical gaps and crowd in private capital while delivering a just climate transition. Designed with Justice 40 requirements in mind, so really intended to mobilize capital and projects in low-income and historically disadvantaged communities. And so this program was designed with three primary objectives. The first is reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other air pollutants. The second, delivering the benefits of those investments of greenhouse gas and air pollutant reduction projects, specifically in low income and disadvantaged communities. And the third is mobilizing financing and private capital to stimulate additional deployment of greenhouse gas and air pollution reduction projects in these communities. And so achieving these objectives also while delivering economic outcomes through clean energy projects and financing, through things like providing the necessary low-cost capital for clean energy technologies that have the financing that has historically been absent for these technologies in these communities, accelerating bankability in underserved markets and technologies, creating good clean energy jobs across the country, focusing benefits on low-income communities, and building wealth and energy independence through innovative financing solutions. So next slide, please. So the program is designed and focused on eligible projects that fall into three primary categories of commercial ready technologies. And it's really important to emphasize commercial ready. This funding is not for emerging technologies or innovation funds. This is really for commercially viable technologies in the market that we're looking to scale and deploy in low-income communities. So that's across distributed energy generation and storage, net zero buildings, and net zero transportation. So if we dive a little bit deeper, what does that mean? What are the projects that might qualify under these priority projects? Distributed energy generation and storage, we're talking about residential and commercial rooftop solar, community solar, possibly community wind, and other distributed generation and energy assets. Net zero buildings, we're not just talking about new construction of net zero residential buildings, which can be challenging to achieve, but we're also talking about affordable family housing decarbonization and retrofits and adaptive reuse. And zero emissions transportation. So talking about charging infrastructure deployment, micro mobility, fleet electrification for municipalities, or zero emissions medium and heavy duty vehicles. Now, while these are the priority projects, it's important to note that there are you can qualify for funding from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund if your project doesn't fall perfectly under these priority projects through the NCIF competition, such as long as you meet specific criteria to do that. So if we can go to the next slide. So there's 6 qualified project criteria that must be met for any and all funding of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. The first is that it would reduce or avoid greenhouse gas emissions. Importantly, that it's consistent with US climate goals. The second is that it would reduce or avoid emissions of other air pollutants. The third, which is really important, is that it may not have otherwise been financed. So this is really an opportunity to take those projects that we've been wanting to get done, but just aren't penciling, aren't financed, aren't being able to get the right capital stack for whatever reason off the shelf and possibly get those mobilized. The fourth is that it would mobilize private capital. There's a mandate within the EPA for a certain percentage of the funding to leverage a certain amount of capital from private markets as well. So super important. The fifth, we've already went over that, must be a commercial technology. And the sixth is that it would deliver additional benefits in one or more qualified categories. And so what I will say is that some of these are very, very vague and broad qualifying categories, and there are ongoing efforts across all awardees in negotiation with the EPA and in active conversations to provide more granular details and guidance on what is going to be a qualified project. And that guidance is going to be distributed to potential lenders and subawardees and recipients of this funding in the coming weeks as programs launch from the awardees of this program. So next slide, please. So how is this $27 billion being allocated? Three competitions and three independent yet complementary programs have been established. The first is the National Clean Investment Fund. This is a $14 billion fund, really designed to mobilize financial assistance and direct project investments across the country in qualifying projects. There's the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, $6 billion fund, really designed to provide capitalization funding to a national network of nonprofits that are supporting and developing a national network of clean energy financiers at the community level. And then there's the Solar for All funding, which is a $7 billion fund that has been allocated to 60 plus local, state, tribal governments, and other eligible nonprofits to provide funding for new and existing low-income solar programs across the country. So I think it's important to notice the LIDAC allocations. So how's this, and thinking about how this program is really going to achieve impact in terms of generational wealth building and addressing issues with low-income and historical disadvantaged communities accessing financing and being the last movers for many technologies. So 100% of the Solar for All program and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, $13 billion in funding, is mandated to be allocated to low-income and disadvantaged communities. Additionally, through the National Clean Investment Fund, in line with Justice 40 requirements, 40% of that funding is also mandated to flow towards those communities. All three awardees of that competition have set expectations for their own program to far exceed that 40% threshold. So really exciting opportunity to dramatically shift capital markets for these communities and start delivering clean energy projects and solutions that really build wealth, improve lives, the quality of lives through this program. So we're really, really excited about that. Next slide, please. And you can just click through this slide. So I think it's just important to take a minute to kind of zoom out and see exactly how this funding is going to flow. And you can keep clicking until the end of the slide. But essentially, the $27 billion allocated across all three of these competitions. Within these competitions, there are awardees that I won't be getting into, but my colleague Asia will be addressing here shortly. And I think this is just a couple more clicks, and then we can see the full picture. I apologize. So as you can see on the far right, Solar for All, this competition, again, providing financial assistance and direct investments in projects for solar. So really specific to one priority project category. The CCIA competition, providing capitalization funding flowing to community lenders, which is really establishing that national network of lenders who are going to provide the financing for clean energy projects in communities. Important to note, though, that 100% of the funding from the CCIA has to not just go to qualified projects, but they must be priority projects as well. The distinction is the NCIF competition, primarily designed to provide financial assistance and direct project investments flowing towards qualified projects, doesn't have to meet the priority project classification, but does have to meet qualified projects. But NCF awardees can also provide financial assistance and market building activities in collaboration with community lenders as well. So this is just a good visual to represent exactly how the funding is going to flow and where you might fit into that picture, start generating some ideas and thoughts around that. So next slide, please. Yep.
All right, I'll go to this next one here.
There we go. Perfect. So this slide, really, all we're trying to demonstrate is, why do we need the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to accelerate the bankability of these projects? There's a lot of reasons. This is not an exhaustive list, but on the left, we've just tried to demonstrate a couple barriers, historical barriers that have prevented capital and financing from flowing to these communities and for these technologies. So the first is really insufficient deal sizes. So oftentimes these are really small deals, and there's an imbalance between the risk and the reward for a private financial institution or a private capital provider to want to make the investment in that project or in that community. Oftentimes we're talking about communities and customers with low to no credit history, making transactions very risky for traditional lenders for certain activities and communities. There can be high transaction costs, especially upfront costs for these very sometimes small technologies and investments. So lending activity to these can be really inefficient. There's a lack of transparency, particularly with the program and emerging data requirements that are going to be requested around climate impacts and greenhouse gas emissions and other air pollutants. And there's not a strong track record of that type of data or the data infrastructure being available in these communities. And then just there's challenges entering new markets, designing new products, and changing business practices. And so what we've tried to do on the right is just demonstrate some of the tools that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is really enabling to help solve for some of these barriers and really address the inefficiencies and start mobilizing capital to get deals and projects off the ground and working for communities. So we've got things like loan guarantees, loan aggregations, patient capital and credit enhancements, a whole range of things. I'm not going to go through all of these here today, but happy to address some questions on any specific one if we have some time here at the end. And so I think I'm going to pass off to my colleague Asia, who's going to talk us through community lenders and the important role that they play in this program as well.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, hello everyone. I'll be going into a little more detail about the program and some of the lenders that we will see and that you all should look forward to working with. So specifically, as Nick just discussed, the GGRF has goals beyond just emissions reduction. Specifically, it's meant to serve communities historically left behind and who face market challenges that prohibit them from affordable financing or access to clean energy solutions or low emission solutions. So even from the earliest stages of the GGRF program, it was clear that community lenders would be the best avenue to deploy the funding and reach the communities that the GGRF aims to reach. Community lenders are eligible for subawards in the GGRF program, as Nick just demonstrated, and a little bit more about what community lenders are. At a high level, community lenders are an array of specialized types of lenders with unique characteristics or mission-driven practices, and they mostly serve communities or projects that Main Street banks historically have not. So oftentimes these sorts of financial institutions are very well versed in blended finance and leveraging public and private funds to provide innovative solutions and low-cost financing. So specifically, these are the three prominent types of community lenders that are critical to GGRF. We have community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, and CDFI is a term that's given to specialized private financial institutions who are often mission-driven, serve low-income communities or disadvantaged redline communities, and they can be certified by the Treasury CDFI Fund. Upon certification, CDFIs are eligible for other types of programs and funding from the federal government, including the New Markets Tax Credits, if anyone has ever heard of that. But it's also important to note that you can still be a community development financial institution without specifically being certified by the Treasury, because that's just a way to get extra resources, but that wouldn't change your mission or your goals as a financial institution. Second, we have minority depository institutions. These are specifically financial institutions who are majority owned or controlled by a minority, such as Black, Asian, Hispanic, Hawaiian, or Native Americans. And these are also financial institutions that become eligible for special programs from the federal government. But this isn't anything they have to apply to. This is just, again, the designation that they receive upon being majority controlled by a minority. And then, of course, we have green banks, which are mission-driven public or quasi-public nonprofit organizations that finance clean energy projects. Next slide, please. Okay, and then we have, again, green banks, well, not again, but green banks have already played a critical role in mobilizing private dollars for climate. Historically, they've proven a successful model for mobilizing dollars towards climate solutions. And the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund really presents the opportunity to grow this model by leveraging the reach of other types of financial institutions and ensuring dollars are flowing to communities that need it most and communities that green banks might not have historically been reaching. Next slide, please. So a little bit of a deeper dive into community development financial institutions. They've also already demonstrated significant skills in leveraging private dollars. As you can see from these graphics, the spread of these institutions and the size of their industry represents a critical reach. So GGRF tapping into this industry presents the opportunity to significantly increase the communities reached in the flow of dollars for clean energy solutions. They alone leverage 8-to-1 for private dollars from some of the other programs and funding models that they use. And also a little more context, CDFIs typically include different types of financial institutions, including credit unions, loan funds, and development banks. But we've also seen the CDFI designation include other types of lenders, even the ones that we just discussed, like MDIs and green banks, since it is also a certification. Next slide, please. So a little more context on the program status. The National Clean Investment Fund, Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, and Solar for All program have all announced their awardees earlier this year. And for the National Clean Investment Fund and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, all of the organizations that were awarded and all of the organizations here represent a coalition of community lenders, are ran by community lenders, or have plans to provide subawards to community lenders. So it's very clear that for these two programs, given that Solar for All is to 60 state, tribal, and municipal governments, the other pieces of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is heavily reliant on community lenders' role and reach. Next slide, please. And again, on the program status, the period of performance is beginning in fall of 2024. So that's where we are right now. We had award announcements earlier this year, negotiations over the past few months, and we're finally hoping to see the start of the period of performance and some projects getting funded and showcased over the next few months. And the period of performance is going to be 7 years long until 2031. Next slide. So with all of that being said, we just want to highlight that some aspects of GGRF are still in limbo. There's plenty of uncertainties and barriers that are still being worked through by awardees and other organizations heavily invested in the GGRF landscape, such as lack of standardized loan products and reporting. We really need robust capacity building for community lenders who have never done green lending before. There's a lack of clear project standards, and we need to be able to build these pipelines. Next slide. Again, not going to go into these too heavily because I know we're coming at time, but for the most part, coordination and cooperation can help solve many of the issues that are here. And I also just want to note that the awardees, and again, other actors in the GGRF landscape are working actively to find solutions along to solve some of these barriers. So I think with that, we can go to questions.
Yeah,
All
Miguel,
right.
I know we're a little over time, so I don't know if we need to condense this, but our team is more than happy to follow up with any additional questions that come through via email too, if that's more efficient.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Nick. Well, you know, we'll take a few questions here. If anyone has them, go ahead and raise your hand. You can use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. And I see Terry first. So Terry, what do you have for Nicholas and Asia?
Just a quick one, because I've had this question before. And it can be very general. Don't go weedy, just generally. Does accessing the green finance, whatever way, right, impact an organization's, nonprofit organization's credit score or bond rating ability for other things? That is some feedback I've gotten. I just thought that folks might be interested. Does accessing this impact their other ability for, debt, basically?
Yeah, and I might tap in our colleague Whitney, who's on the line too. But as far as we understand, no, like not in a negative way. This really is designed to help build credit, especially for nonprofit organizations that maybe don't have a history of credit or have strong balance sheets. This is an opportunity to do projects and get financing in a way that allows them to do things that also helps them build credit and demonstrate that ability to continue to receive financing in the future.
Yeah, Nick, I don't have much to add to that. Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Mann. I work with Nick and Asia and GGRF things. But Terry, I am intrigued that you've been hearing that. So to the degree that if that comes up again, or if you hear more, if you'd be willing to pass that along, just to make sure that we are understanding all of the nuance there. But yeah, as Nick said, it certainly is every dollar of GGRF funding that's deployed has to be accompanied with private capital. It can't be deployed by itself. So it really that's very core to the goals of the program. So I would be surprised if that's true, but if you learn more about where that's coming from, would be curious to know.
And I'll do y'all one better. I will get at the hospital treasury group meeting where this came up to be an issue, and I will get to the bottom of it and let you guys know.
Thanks so much.
All right, we're here to serve you. So if you all have any more questions, please put them in the chat, raise your hand. If they come to you later, we'll address them, whether in the chat or over email. Anyone else want to go before we go to our next speaker? All right, well, we'll have plenty of time to keep answering questions here and in our one-on-ones. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jasmine to introduce our speaker.
Awesome. Thanks, Miguel. We're really excited to have Andrew Hazer here with us from the New York City Energy Efficiency Corporation, or NYSEC, to present on accelerating clean energy with effective green financing. Andrew's work at NYSEC supports the business development team, which sources, executes, and finances transactions for projects that aim to increase energy efficiency and further clean energy use within buildings. So we're really happy to have him here today to speak about that work and NYSEC's role in deploying GGRF dollars. So Andrew, go ahead and take it away.
Great, yeah, thank you. Thank you for this program. And it's great to present in front of you all. Looking forward to talking more about the work that NYSEC is doing and the field of green banks more broadly. And then certainly hope there are a lot of questions that we can hopefully provide some answers to. So first, I'll just jump into a little bit about NYSEC and our background. So if you go to the next slide, please. So as Nick and Asia just described, very well, we fall into the third category there of community lenders, being a green bank. NYSEC's mission over the years has expanded quite a significant amount, and you can see on this slide it reads basically what we strive to do now, which is deliver financing solutions that advance energy efficiency and clean energy in the communities that we serve. Next slide, please. So we like to brand ourselves as the first local green bank in the US. And I can get into kind of what that means in relation to the markets that we serve. But We were founded in New York City in 2010. At the time of our inception, we were actually part of the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, which went under a slightly different moniker at the time. But we were initially capitalized with grant dollars that flowed to the City of New York and then to NYSEG with the goal of creating a revolving loan fund that would help to green the building stock of New York City. Shortly after inception, we split off and became what we are today, which is an independent 501c3 mission-driven lender that aims to support clean energy and energy efficiency projects. We are also the New York City CPACE administrator. So that is a kind of another program which we help support in New York City, and more than happy to talk about CPACE to the extent that folks on this call would like to get into it a little bit more. So again, you can see on the right there, that is NYSEG's current lending territory. So as I said, we started off just focusing on New York City. We are now obviously have expanded over the past decade, almost decade and a half here, to 8-9 state region in the Northeast Mid-Atlantic. Through our transactions and our loans, we've mobilized over $520 million of capital for these projects. We've greened close to 17,000 affordable housing units and reduced close to or just over 1.3 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So that really kind of gets at the heart of what NYSEG is and what green banks are in terms of the mission-driven orientation and what we're striving for. So those are really key metrics for us and what we are trying to do with our dollars. Most of our projects are real estate based. We are, however, real estate type agnostic. So we have projects and have closed transactions within multifamily, affordable multifamily, commercial, industrial, institutional, hospitality. So we are fairly real estate agnostic and can touch a wide range of projects and technology types. I will just note, and I will certainly kind of provide some overlay of how the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund affects NYSEG in particular. But with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund here and coming down the pike for NYSEG, we are also anticipate broadening our reach a little bit outside of our traditional primary lending territory. So we are able to, whether NYSEG is directly financing a project or facilitating in any way we can through lending partners that we have outside of our territory, we're happy to look at projects not just within that 8-9 state region as well. Next slide. So what we do at the heart of what we are a debt provider for energy efficiency and clean energy projects. But given our position in the market and what we're trying to facilitate more broadly, we try and offer also a number of services that ultimately end up looking like community education, market education, etc. So the first line item there, direct lending, that is the core of what NYSEG does. And I will get into some case studies on projects that we've closed recently as they pertain to a handful of loan products that we think would probably be most relevant for this group here today. We also operate programs. We work closely with the city and the state in a number of different manners. We highlighted here our pre-development loan program, which we help facilitate with NYSERDA, which is the New York State agency. So that has been a very effective program for us, and it's been great. We've been able to provide low to zero cost pre-development loans for certain projects that fit within the category of that program. But that's just one thing where most green banks and NYSEG certainly look to provide some community engagement and facilitate programs where we think the outcomes help support our mission. And then the last couple points here, consulting services and thought leadership. As one of the longest standing green banks, we've been focused on helping to prop up and support other organizations, green bank CDFIs, whatever it may be, in sharing our learnings and our successes and our failures in the past through our years of green lending for organizations that are trying to get into this field. And again, CPACE administration is on this slide, so we could certainly spend a lot of time on CPACE, but CPACE is at a high level, a relatively new financing product for energy efficiency and clean energy measures in buildings. It's a program and a financing mechanism that's facilitated through municipalities. And meaning each municipality that operates a CPACE program has an administrator. NYSEG is the administrator for New York City. So again, just wanted to highlight a few things that make NYSEG and green banks in general unique. The number one thing and the first bullet point on this slide is flexible financing and tools. So when we say flexible financing, what I think makes NYSEG very unique and able to fill gaps in the market is that we offer a wide array of loan types and products ranging from pre-development acquisition and shorter term bridge loans all the way through towards traditional project financing and term loans. So we have the ability, being a nonprofit and mission-oriented lender, to spend the time working through complex projects, working through difficult situations, or smaller loans, as was mentioned previously, that might not have the general interest from the larger capital markets due to a number of factors, but size certainly is a main driver of that limited capital reach. And we're able to hopefully solve for yes and get these projects done. And then ultimately, what we are trying to do is catalyze dollars where we can. So one of the main drivers for NYSEG, as we're looking at projects and as we're trying to decide whether a potential opportunity fits within NYSEG's portfolio or whether it aligns with mission, is how a particular project affects impact and how each dollar that NYSEG funds multiplies, whether it's additional private or public investment, and what the impact per dollar is. So that is really the main driver of the transactions that we aim to finance. So as I mentioned, we're going to focus on 3 different products that we think are kind of most relevant for this group. The first one here is incentive bridging. So, and again, more than happy to answer questions at the end or as they come, but I would just give a overview of each of these products. So incentive bridging, we found, has been a very helpful tool for the borrowers that we serve. What it means practically is we are able to provide a bridge loan product which fills a gap in cash flow or covers upfront capital expenditures for projects where there are meaningful direct incentives. So in New York, there are a number of direct incentives for solar, battery storage, EV charging, whatever that may be. Usually those direct incentives are paid at project completion or after some measurement and verification period once a project is installed and up and running. So oftentimes for borrowers that we serve, there's a real need to bridge that cash flow until a project is complete and those direct incentives are paid. It's a similar logic for tax credits. Traditionally, tax credits through the ITC for renewable energy projects are very meaningful. With the IRA, there are, of course, I think as most of us know, additional adders that make the ITC that much more meaningful for these projects. Traditionally, that investment tax credit was monetized through a tax equity partnership. With the IRA now, there's the ability for tax credits to be monetized through direct pay for nonprofits or tax exempt entities, or transferability, meaning for-profit entities can go into the transfer market and essentially sell the tax credits to an eligible buyer. So it opens up a lot of liquidity for monetizing these investment tax credits. But that same logic as with direct incentives still holds true in that there usually is a need for that gap in cash flow to be bridged until the project is complete. And then the ITC is submitted for, and there's a meaningful time gap between when a project starts construction and when ITCs can be monetized. Next slide. So this was an example of an incentive bridge that we did relatively recently. The project in New York, BES was the borrower, Building Energy Services. They were installing steam traps across a portfolio of NYCHA buildings in Manhattan. NYSEG did just that. This was a bridge to a direct incentive whereby the city was providing a direct incentives per dollar per steam trap. This was a short-term loan that allowed BES, who was the contractor and installer of this project, to cover capital expenditures between project inception and project completion when the direct incentives were paid out. The next product here is the most simple that NYSEG probably operates within, a direct loan. So this one is relatively self-explanatory, right? This is a loan made from NYSEG's balance sheet to a creditworthy entity, traditionally a building owner, for eligible project costs. So at the bottom of the slide, you can see a handful of eligible project costs that we traditionally are most often financed with direct loans. Again, we are pretty commercial real estate type agnostic. A couple things to note here. Generally speaking, we are only able to finance up to 90% of project costs. So for most, if not all of NYSEG's loans and transactions, we would require a borrower equity contribution, but leverage can traditionally go up to around 90% of project costs. Direct loans, we're able to finance construction and or a term period. So traditionally we size our loans in terms of term with a standard construction period that would be interest only in the beginning, followed by a permanent period of fully amortizing payments once a project is fully installed and complete. Here was a example of a recent direct loan that NYSEG did. This was a VRF and HVAC system installation, part of an electrification retrofit that the American Academy of Dramatic Arts undertook. So this was about a $1.2 million direct loan made right to the entity that owned this property here in Manhattan. And it was a very simple structure, a construction period followed by a term period with amortizing payments over the life of that term. Typically, NYSEG is able to go up to around 10 years of permanent loan following construction. Next slide. And then the third product type here is a PPA and ESA loan. So I'll just be very brief on this one, as this might be the least applicable here, but these are more traditional project finance type structures whereby a special purpose entity or developer will own and install energy assets, whether generation or energy efficiency assets, and NYSEG or a lender would finance that SPE or developer directly. So in this case, that developer would sign a PPA or ESA with an off-taker, such as yourselves, to either pay for or receive the benefits from a generation system or an energy efficiency system, whether it's renewable energy generated or efficiency savings through operating expense savings. So this is a creative way for that NYSEG has been able to finance more traditional project financings in the past. This is just a quick example of a PPA model that we did actually in Washington, D.C. On houses of worship. This looked like it participated in the Washington, D.C. Solar for All program. It all of the generation by the system benefited LMI off-takers in a community solar model. And NYSEG financed directly Sunlight General Capital, who is the developer and owner of the systems. And I think that's all we had. So would definitely like to open it up for questions. Before I do that, briefly, I just wanted to touch on GGRF. I think Nick and Asia gave an excellent overview of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. But I can speak briefly how it affects NYSEG as a hopeful participant on the ground, and then can certainly answer any other questions if you have them. But if you go back, if you remember back to that diagram that was just up on the screen of the flow of funds, NYSEG is one of the named subawardees under the Coalition for Green Capital's primary award. So we are hopeful, right? So we would be that blue box right under that. So we are hopeful to receive meaningful grant capital as a subawardee under the NCI, under one of the primary awardees of the NCIF. We not only hope to access that monies, but also through other means leverage additional capital that's out there through Solar for All awards and CCIA awards. So I think all in all, it's a huge driver, hopefully, of projects going forward and organizations like NYSEG going forward to help catalyze some of these projects. And of course, as was mentioned, additional investment dollars, whether private or public. So it will certainly affect NYSEG going forward. I had listed some of our minimum loan sizes on those product type slides. Right now, those are still within the range of projects that we would look at on minimum loan sizes for each project, for each product type. But generally speaking, as GGRF funds become available, there's probably going to be more of a proclivity to look towards projects in the $500,000 to $1 million range. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Andrew. That was a really helpful presentation. And I think it's unique that we get to hear your perspective as a lender. And I think my ears especially perked up to the first and second product that you talked about with the direct loans and the incentive bridging, because something that we've covered a lot in our program is the tax credit direct pay benefit. And I think that, this is GGR, or this type of financing could be another tool in the toolkit. So we have time for a few questions. I wanted to call attention to Laura's question in the chat. The project you had talked about with Sunlight General Capital, Laura, I know is working on a similar project of, well, maybe Laura, I might invite you to come off mute and kind of discuss your project and get Andrew's perspective. I don't want to butcher your question.
Yeah, I'm in Athens, Georgia, and currently what we're trying to do is really been pursuing Solar for All the past few weeks anyway, and it's for Habitat for Humanity homes. There's 63 homes being built in this community, and our goal is to solarize all those homes. And the first home is being built as we speak and will probably be done by the end of the year. All the homes are being designed to be solar ready. Right now, all we need is a bunch of money. So that's, but we have people really excited about it. The community really wants to do it. We just need to know how to finance this project. And I was actually interested in the Sunlight General Capital project, because when they laid out, we just had a meeting this week on Solar for All being implemented in Georgia. And that was one of the things they talked about, is putting solar on the nonprofits, and then some of the savings that they get on their solar energy goes to low income households. So I just wanted to, it was interesting to hear that. It's the first time I heard it about that this week. And then it sounds like these projects are happening.
Yeah, so I'll speak to the extent I can. More than happy to follow up offline. I can give you all the details in particular about that project, and if we can be of help. I don't think we'd be able, whether we would be involved in a financing directly or not. We're more than happy to talk through if we have any particular advice. But so I want to make the distinction, and sorry that I think this was maybe confusing if this is what you were thinking. So it's not, it wasn't financed under the Solar for All program under the GGRF. So in Washington, DC in particular, there is a program called Solar for All. And of course, all these acronyms and names are now overlapping. But essentially what that meant was this was a community solar model. So I think what you were referring to, right? This was a solar installation put on a commercial property on this house of worship. The energy through the program, through the Solar for All program administered by DC, essentially offered zero cost electricity to LMI off-takers. So the solar on the commercial property was essentially sold back into the grid, and then facilitated at no cost to LMI off-takers. So this was financed a couple of years ago, just off of traditional capital sources of NYSEG, so not Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund dollars, in a community solar model. But I do believe, to your point, Solar for All money under the GGRF most likely is geared at projects very much like the one you're speaking about.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was the first time I've heard about it this week, and then you mentioned it again. I mean, it's the same concept, right? But they're offering it under the Solar for All, the actual Solar for All that you put in your 3 buckets there, in Georgia. So interesting.
One other
Awesome.
thing to flag, maybe, Laura, I don't know if you're also talking to National Habitat for Humanity. Is it on your radar that they're also an NCIF awardee?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure if they are or not.
So Habitat for
are.
Humanity is a partner of Power Forward Communities.
Mm-hmm.
And Daniel Gura at National Habitat is the contact who's thinking about their national program. So that could be another avenue for you.
Mm-hmm. It's difficult to know. Well, I guess there's several that would cover Georgia Solar for All grants, as I understand it, when I started looking at it. So what, do you shop around for your best Solar for All opportunity? I mean, that just gets pretty difficult and messy when you're just trying to solarize a little neighborhood. I don't know. I guess that's the question.
But yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it remains to be seen. Awardees I know are thinking about how to communicate to the market where sort of like where's your home or what's the best avenue to get funding. I am not 100% confident on all of the overlaps of Solar for All programs covering Georgia, but it's true that if there's a Solar for All program in place and there are community lenders who are eligible for CCIA, and then nationally there's NCIF, that there's multiple avenues where this funding could come in. And I think in many ways it could work together and is designed to. But I think starting with the Capital Good Fund, I believe, is the Georgia awardee.
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm going to share it in the chat too. We've been speaking with them about the model that I think you're describing. I think that's, in this particular instance, probably a good starting place. But it's true that there may be overlapping Solar for All applications in different places.
Yeah, and I would just echo that. I think a lot of this, right, is to be seen as it plays out on the ground, right? We're at the very early stages of this financing hitting the market and then being able to be dispersed. I think I just saw today that I think the first project under NCIF was funded, which is fantastic, from Climate United. So right, we're just starting to have groups deploy this money. So I think a lot of what you're referring to, Laura, kind of what it looks like on the ground, I think it is going to be different for every jurisdiction, every group that has access to grant money. A lot of it is going to come down to how they are kind of educating the market and making these offerings available in certain jurisdictions. But hopefully, right, like in New York City, we have the New York City Accelerator, which is part of the mayor's office, which is a free resource for all things energy efficiency, clean energy, for building owners. So I would start kind of with the local aggregation hubs and folks that should have kind of more of an aggregated source of information that you can then branch off from and get details.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Andrew. We are approaching a break, but I did want to throw out one more question before we go on break. So Andrew, you had mentioned that over 90% of your loan volume supports LMI communities, and I know here our participants represent a mix of some who support affordable communities and some that might not. So do you have any guidance or advice for those who might be seeking this type of financing but don't meet that qualification?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a mission-driven organization first and foremost, with our environmental goals, but our social goals also play a factor into how we look at impact per NYSEG dollar. So one of the stats up on the slide that Jasmine, you're referencing, over the past 3 or so years, 90+% of our portfolio has been in LMI communities or disadvantaged communities. However, I think just broadly speaking, NYSEG as an organization finances both affordable and market rate projects. So that's not a non-starter by any means for us, for projects, whether it's not in an LMI community or a disadvantaged community, if it's kind of quote unquote market rate, right? Depending on what that asset or project actually is, that certainly is something that we finance. I would say, kind of speaking broadly for green banks, NYSEG right, hopes to access greenhouse gas reduction fund dollars. A lot of other green banks do as well, but each green bank will be different on how their capital allocations are. But speaking from NYSEG, right, we have our legacy capital. Being a nonprofit, we have very different buckets of capital. Kind of our historic legacy capital, which I mentioned. We access philanthropic capital. We also access traditional commercial sources of capital. So whether a project that is not benefiting an LMI community is eligible or not for greenhouse gas reduction fund dollars, I think more often than not, there's certainly an opportunity for green banks to look at the project if it is quote unquote market rate as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks, Andrew. Okay, well, Miguel, I'll pass it back off to you.
Wow, Andrew, thank you so much. Nick and Asia, thank you so much. We have learned the 101 basics of GGRF, $27 billion of low-cost capital available for clean projects. And then Andrew just shared with us the real financial products that are being offered and real case studies of how people have leveraged these dollars to get those clean projects in the ground. So exciting. It was a lot of information. We are going to take a 5-minute break to process all of that. And then when you get back, we'll apply what we've learned with a little scavenger hunt exercise. So see you all back here at 3:10. Grab some water, grab some coffee, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
And that's 3:10 Eastern. So
Yes,
adapt
thank
if
you.
you're in different time zones. Thanks all.
Hey, everyone. Go ahead and make your way back to your desks. We're now at 3:10. We'll get started in just a moment with our very exciting breakout activity. And if you're back, we'll be hanging out with our peers. So go ahead and let us know you're here by turning your camera on or shooting a thumbs up. You get your choice. Hey, thanks, Terry. Appreciate that. Okay, we're now at 3:11, so I will get our slide deck rolling and we'll hop into the breakout activity. All right, so for this part of the Clean Energy Academy workshop, we're going on a fun scavenger hunt and a reflection breakout activity. So here's the pitch. We're going to group you with other participants based on your geography. And then over the next 20 minutes, you and those geographic-based teams will find lenders in your area and talk about what opportunities may be available for you to leverage their low-cost green capital. What is that going to look like more specifically? Well, for the first 10 minutes, for part one of this breakout activity, we're going to send you to an Excel sheet that we'll share in the chat shortly. You will see in the Excel sheet, whoop, and if you are unmuted, don't forget to mute yourself. Thank you. You'll see in the Excel sheet your organization's name to make this as straightforward as possible. But first, you might not see your organization's name, so make sure you're in the correct geography. If you're in the Midwest, you click Midwest. Everyone's geographies are pretty straightforward, except for Adamas. We have you in the Southeast for numerical reasons. As a Marylander, I also know Maryland's in the Northeast, but other than Adama, everyone's geographies will be very straightforward. So you'll find your geography. You'll find your organization's name. We have Loyola University of Chicago up for now. And after you find your organization name in this green column, you're going to look to the right and you'll see in the blue column a link, right? So after you find your name, go to the blue column and click that link. That link is going to take you to the landing page for lenders in your area. And once you open that page up, the scavenger hunt begins, and we'll have you answer three questions about that lender in the yellow columns, right? So the only place that you should be typing in the Excel sheet will be the yellow column in your geographic sheet. And don't worry, we'll have facilitators in each of the breakout rooms to help you, to remind you of all these instructions should you have any questions. So by the end of it, you might be assigned anywhere between two to four lenders to check out for the first 10 minutes. By the end of it, your yellow columns should have some text with some basic information about those lenders. Okay, that's the first 10 minutes. That's part one. After 10 minutes, your facilitators will let you know, hey, it's time for reflection. And we'll use those last 10 minutes to just go over what we learned during the scavenger hunt. These are the three questions that your facilitators will ask you. What did you learn? What projects might be relevant to what you learned? And what are the remaining obstacles to getting at this low-cost capital? So the facilitators are taking notes. This will be the last 10 minutes, and we've already assigned your breakout rooms. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get you into those breakout rooms. Any questions about this activity before we push the big button? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and split you up now. And if any future questions, just let your breakout room facilitator know. Thanks all.
Great. And I dropped the spreadsheet in the chat, so let us know if you have any trouble accessing it. And I'm opening all the breakout rooms now. Hi, Cynthia. How are you? Hey, Miguel.
Hey, Jess.
y'all. I had to quietly leave my room to close all the rooms. So I just, Andrew was in the middle of speaking and I just slipped away.
Well, we're right on schedule. Using the new time frame, we should move on from this at 3:45 to the assignment. And that'll be Maddie.
Yep. Also, Aaron, I'm not sure if Hamlet told you, but we had a blast visiting your campus.
I'm glad. Yeah. Sorry I missed you.
Yeah.
Aaron, the glass floor where you could look down and see the geothermal pipes was like way too cool. I was geeking out. That's very smart to put it up that way.
Yeah, that's one of the only examples of good value engineering in a construction process. Yeah, usually you take the good things out of the building in that process, and this one we put a good one in.
Absolutely. Well, hey, welcome back, everyone. Hope that was a fun and engaging exercise for you. What we'll now do is take the next 8 or so minutes to just share out some of these larger reflections. And don't worry, I'll call on your facilitators first to ask how that went. Honestly, in our room, we only had time to each answer the first question. So it's A-okay if that's what you had, but let's kick it to Jasmine, your group. You were in the Northeast region. What were the reflections that people had after the scavenger hunt?
Yeah, so I would say I posed a question of what were the reflections after the scavenger hunt and just the presentations overall. We had the benefit of having Andrew in our room. But a couple of takeaways. Jen from Northern Light had mentioned wanting probably a better communication between the teams that could make green financing happen, because while she's learning about certain benefits or GGRF opportunities, there are others like those on the finance team that would need to be a part of the discussion. So that was one key takeaway. And then Andrew got to talk a little bit more about the benefits of leveraging green financing, whether it's like different terms that can be used in green financing deals, financing things off a traditional lending cycle. So we got to talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, so I'll just pause there. And close to the end, we were talking about CPACE a little bit, but then I had to bow out.
Well, let me jump in because that question also came up in my breakout room. Aaron from Loyola Chicago asked that, and I want to give Andrew a few moments to really dig in. Like, why not just go to Wells Fargo? One of those situations where green financing is going to make more sense?
Yeah, so I think there are a number of different ways to kind of answer this question. I think as I mentioned in our breakout group for the Northeast region, what we kind of view as the value proposition of green banks, and kind of speaking for the larger green bank ecosystem, but particularly for NYSEG, right, we are another source of capital out there in the market. We operate like a commercial lender. We have credit boxes that we have to abide by, and we think very much along those lines from a strictly commercial lender perspective, right? So we're looking for creditworthy transactions with creditworthy borrowers, but what differentiates us and what makes our capital unique and can be hopefully beneficial to our borrowers is that we are a specialized source of capital. So for a number of reasons, your Wells Fargo or regional bank may not have the appetite for a smaller, nuanced project, whether it's an energy efficiency retrofit, whether it's a renewable energy generation system, whether it's all the above. For size, complexity, nature of the project, nuance in terms of how those projects are underwritten, what we have seen is right on that kind of smaller scale, there just isn't that appetite from the traditional debt capital markets. So Like I said, we are, as an organization, we're a mission-driven lender, so ultimately we want to get these projects done. We want to recycle our capital to do more projects, but what we don't want to do is crowd out other lenders. And we're not in a position where NYSEG is going to be the financial institution that can come in and undercut a traditional commercial bank. If you have options that are that work for you or your sponsorship group, we want you to go with those options. What really we're here to do is fill gaps in the markets where there isn't that interest from traditional commercial debt providers. So we feel that we have the expertise and the nuance to underwrite these particular niche projects, particularly on a smaller scale. And we're not inhibited by the size, the return on time, the return on capital as other lenders may be. And that allows us to really kind of solve for a yes on these particular projects and really try and get them done. Jasmine, as you mentioned, financing transactions out of traditional capital cycles for buildings. I think that's really where green banks can come in handy too. Right, I think generally some of these energy conservation measures or other building upgrades can be rolled into a refi during buildings traditional refi cycle. But I think what it's harder to do is get more traditional debt players in the market to come in and look at these projects off cycle. And that's inherently what NYSEG does and other green banks do.
Thanks so much for that answer, Andrew. And sharing out one more from my group. You know, I know that Dulcie said that who was with CMHA doing affordable housing. This could be, GGRF could be a great for them, especially as COVID relief funding is running out as a new capital source to keep their projects funded. So just one more application of where Green Bank might make sense. I'm going to throw it over to Jesse with our last minute here. Any high-level reflections or lessons learned that you wanted to share from the Southeast group?
Sure. As Andre 3000 from Outcast once famously said, South got something to say. The three takeaways I took from our group, some organizations have difficulty in coming up with upfront capital to access this financing. Second, convincing finance departments to take on debt is hard. And third, tax credits like direct pay are very straightforward, but this is not so. So these are the barriers that our group kind of identified. But the good news is that all folks have identifiable projects and plans to move forward. So I don't know if any of my Southern colleagues have things to add.
No, you summarized it well.
I want to open the floor to Whitney, Asia, and Nick to maybe respond to some of those obstacles too, if you are willing, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just first I want to acknowledge that these are really tough questions, and especially the ones of institutions being debt averse, that feels bigger than green energy. And so I, have sympathy that that's what you're navigating. I think what we heard from John is interesting in that it sounds like you're making the case for how energy savings from these projects over time will be able to pay back the loan. So taking that sort of longer term view, I think is one way that could be compelling. John, are you finding that that's having traction?
I haven't put that message forward to our finance office folks, but that's exactly the message we're going to take to them. It's about cash flow. I mean, basically, hopefully we'll have the spreadsheet that says we're cash flow neutral on this project between the energy savings and the loan repayment.
Yeah, I think that makes sense for sure as an approach. And on the upfront capital costs as well, I know that Laura, you already mentioned that you're working with Capital Good Fund, who has this idea for the third-party owned nonprofit model, where effectively the CDFI would own the solar system for a few years, monetize the direct pay benefits. I guess in this case, that wouldn't necessarily be needed if you or institution is a nonprofit yourself, but being able to use those credits to lower your upfront costs, and then also thinking about, I think one of the benefits of the GGR financing is that it is the lower cost capital from what you might find on private or commercial rate loans. And so that's an opportunity to offset your upfront costs with financing that's maybe not adding so much of a debt burden as traditional market loans would. So certainly a balance, I think, between that upfront cost and the debt burden conversation, but the tools like tax credits and GGRF are meant to help tip the balances at least.
All right. Well, I don't want to forget our friends on the West Coast. Asia, Nick, if you all could type your group's reflections in the chat at the highest level. But I do recognize it's 3:47, so I'm going to pass it off to our newest colleague, Madison Hall, who's an associate on the America's All-In team, to introduce one of our next steps. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and Maddie, the floor will be yours.
Yeah, hello everyone. So as you all move forward to the final session with the Clean Energy Academy, we're excited to hear about the amazing progress each of you has made. So this homework assignment is an opportunity to reflect on the milestones you've achieved and how your clean energy projects are making a positive impact. So during the next session, each of you will be asked to share a brief 1 to 2 minute presentation. We want to hear about 3 key areas from each of you. So first, start with your introduction. This is a chance to remind everyone about the unique perspectives and backgrounds we all bring to this academy. Next, share with us the clean energy projects you've been working on and how they've progressed over the course of the academy. We're especially excited to hear about your work, how your work is making a tangible difference in your communities or organizations. And then finally, tell us about your key takeaways. So what are 1 to 2 lessons or insights that have been the most valuable for you during this program? We really believe that sharing these milestones is not only important for your personal growth, but also for inspiring your peers. So yeah, your stories are just really powerful, and we want to showcase the real world impact of the clean energy transition. Also, as a quick reminder, if you have been selected to participate in our video projects, please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions. We're here to help you tell your story in the best way possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Maddie. And by the way, if you want to have a video project and weren't already reached out to, let us know. We were just basing this off progress from the one-on-ones. But if you're like, hey, I've got a really cool thing, email us. We'll connect you with Maddie and we'll get your cool thing out there. We hope this homework assignment is a relatively light lift, just asking you to just show up next workshop and speak out this progress. Yeah, I will now pass it to Jasmine for our additional announcements.
Perfect. Thanks, Miguel. And just one more note is no slides required. This is just you sharing for 1 to 2 minutes on Zoom about the 3 prompts. So a few reminders before we head out for the afternoon. So we are heading into our final workshop. This is our 3rd, and we're going to schedule a workshop before the end of the month for our wrap up. So I just wanted to note that, and we will be sending a Calendly meeting poll, same as the ones you all have been filling out for the past 3 meetups. So look out for that in our follow-up email to you all. Next slide, Miguel. And then I also wanted to share our one-on-one meeting schedule. So this month, we highly encourage that you all sign up for time with us. I know that some of you may not need a meeting because you're sitting tight because your construction's starting later next year, or you have some things coming up in the spring. So for right now, you may not have anything to talk about, but I just want to make sure that if there are any questions that you all want to talk out with us or you need answered, we're around. And so I want to also make an extra plug. We will send another Calendly schedule link if you'd like to get some time one-on-one with us. It's crazy to think that we're already at the end of the program, but want to make sure you're good and you are empowered with all the knowledge to head into the rest of your clean energy project journey. Next slide. Okay, so just a quick summary on the next steps, just listing them out here. So after this workshop, you'll see an email from us with those two scheduling links, the one-on-one and the group workshop poll, and then a few to-dos on your end until our next convening. So first, super important, if you all have any qualified or direct pay eligible projects that you all completed in your fiscal 24. So I know a lot of you had fiscal years end on June 30th, 2024, and you might have like an eligible project that was completed in the fiscal that just ended. I want to remind you all that your filing deadline for elective pay is November 15th. That's if you don't request an extension. So hopefully at this point you have already registered your project and you're working on the filing or you're waiting for your registration number to then file by November 15th. But super important reminder, and wanted to shout it out to the masses here. If you have any questions about that, feel free to raise your hand or we can connect offline. But did want to make sure to give that note since it is October 1st and we're a month and a half away from that deadline. Your other to-dos are to fill out the group meeting poll, prepare what you might share for the homework assignment that Maddie just shared about. And then Miguel, do you want to talk about the extra credit before we sign off?
Jasmine, I absolutely want to talk about the extra credit. I'm super excited to share this opportunity to watch the new season of Love is Blind because Clean Energy Academy, our co-worker, Taylor Cross, who is a manager on the US policy team, is actually going to be one of the stars of the show. Taylor's main focus here at RMI is actually reducing pollution from heavy industries, that's like aluminum, steel, and cement. But she's also doing that through the application of green hydrogen. Maybe you all have heard about green hydrogen as a buzzword in the climate space. Hydrogen comes up in the show. So we're really happy to support our teammate and coworker on this. The show will be on Netflix starting tomorrow. It's like actually the #1 show on Netflix. So just wanted to flag that for you all. It's a fun opportunity. The extra credit will give you some brownie points. With that, thank you all so much for joining this third iteration of the Clean Energy Academy. Honestly, I'm excited by it. GGRF is literally one of the biggest pots of money from the Inflation Reduction Act. We're so excited to see it going out at the door in the next several months. And we hope and have heard from you all that this may be a really exciting capital source to get your projects in the ground. So that concludes the meeting. Feel free to stick around if you have any questions. We're happy to address them here or on a one-on-one later. And thank you again for your time today.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.